It's the Church of Jesus Christ. Bill, that first winter that the Pilgrims experienced in the New World, they experienced incredible loss, but they still paused and gave thanks. Why was thanksgiving and gratitude such a central virtue to the Pilgrims?
Well, it was critical, and zooming out, Europe, you had persecution of Christians. When you look at the situation in the Netherlands, and they had religious tolerance, but they also had looser morals. And so the Pilgrims realized we're going to be a one-generation movement. So they decided to flee. They went back to England with a ship, but they didn't have any money. So they had the London company financed their boat ride. It was a 66-day journey, 3,000 miles, and they were confined to a between deck, a little 4-foot high space. It wasn't a cruise ship, right? There wasn't the privacy, and there was, babies getting sick. One died, a baby was born. They was so cold because they were delayed several times because the previous ship was leaking, and they had to swap it out. That now they were sailing in the winter. One young pilgrim, John Howland, went topside, and this freezing wave swept the deck and knocked him overboard. Wow. And in the North Atlantic, you don't live long. But luckily, the boat had been tipping over so much that the ropes were dragging in the water, and he caught one. And then they pulled him back in. He was blue, but he survived. But they get to the shores of America. They were planning on going to Virginia, but they got blown off course, almost providentially. Virginia had gone through all these different starving times. One winter, like 500 died, and it was diseases and starvation, and then Indian attacks. Had the Pilgrims landed there, they may not have survived, but they got blown off course, landed in Massachusetts. The area where they landed was uninhabited, strangely enough. A French ship was shipwrecked off the coast of Cape Cod about 3 years earlier, and William Bradford writes that the sailors got ashore, and evidently one might have had an illness that the Indians had no immunity for, and it wiped out that tribe. And the Squanto story is he had been kidnapped about a dozen years earlier, taken to Spain as a slave. The monks had gotten possession of him and let him go, made his way back to England, learns the language, finds a fishing boat to drop him off on the shores of America the winter before the Pilgrims landed, and he only finds his entire tribe was wiped out, so he's living with a neighboring tribe. And half of the Pilgrims died that first winter. And then the next spring is when Squanto shows up, and he speaks to them in perfect English. And Squanto teaches them how to catch fish. They said they tried, but he says, these are salmon, they spawn, and looking at the moon, it's probably going to be in the next week, you better get ready. And then he taught them how to plant corn. That they tried, but he said, no, you got to put a dead fish in the ground where you plant the kernel and it fertilizes it. He taught them how to take the corn and put it in a pot, shake it over a fire and make popcorn, right? He taught them how to catch beaver, but he was their interpreter, put them on good terms with the other Indians. And so the first Thanksgiving, there were almost twice as many Indians as there were Pilgrims. And the Indians brought deer, and the Pilgrims had, puddings and stuff, and it went on for 3 days. But the Pilgrims, they were thankful to God for all these miraculous things that happened that allowed them to survive.
Yeah. And only the gospel can explain that, and their understanding of gratitude as it's defined in the Word of God. And I have to believe that it was their discipline of biblical gratitude that allowed them to endure the hardships. You imagine how much loss they experienced, the burying their loved ones. I know in my own life, we experienced tremendous personal tragedy, but it was the discipline of gratitude so that on our worst day, we're able to look to the God that has provided in so many ways. Bill, it's interesting. You are a historian, a theologian, and you are so well versed on the true purpose and the true mission of the Pilgrims so many years ago here in America. Why is it so important for families to tell the true story of our founding, the true story of the Pilgrims, and how faith wasn't an afterthought for them, but it was foundational to everything they did?
Yeah, it's critical. I wrote a book on the history of socialism, and I talk about how socialism is counterfeit Christianity. People say, well, the Pilgrims, they shared, but if you look a little closer, like under a microscope, the Pilgrims with this covenant form of government included you get blessings from God, and you voluntarily share them with your neighbor because you're doing it as unto God. Jesus said, whatever you do to the least of these, my brethren, you've done unto me. Socialism takes away your stuff involuntarily, gives it to somebody you'll never meet. They don't care where it came from, right? But in the Bible, you get property. You get stuff. God blesses you with it, and it's yours. And then you can be moved with compassion to give to somebody in need, because you're doing it as unto the Lord, and they experience the love of God through a real person. And it knits together the body. And the Pilgrims came over with this. It lasted for 10 years, and then the Puritans came over. They adopted it, and lo and behold, the word federal is Latin for covenant. We have a covenant form of government in America where it's we the people, government from the consent of the governed. It's a bottom-up form of government like a living tree, not a dead pyramid ruled top-down by some globalist leader that issues mandates.
These stories are so important to tell. And I think in this moment that we are in, as our good friend Os Guinness often says, this civilizational moment, I don't think there's ever been a more important time to pass these stories down. That's why I'm so grateful for you and for your ministry and for what we continue to do here at Coral Ridge Ministries, preserving and promoting America's Christian heritage. Bill, thank you so much for joining me on this special Thanksgiving episode of Truths That Transform.
Thank you, Rob.